Hi there you guys, welcome to my channel. Let me get one thing out of the way very quickly at the beginning of this video. Yes, I am a grown-ass adult, and yes, I do love watching pro wrestling. And in this video I'm gonna showcase why. Now, every time I talk about this with the new people that I meet, they always have the same reaction at the beginning. You know that's fake, right? You know that's not real. And I've heard this all the time, and you will definitely get judged for loving wrestling as an adult. I have always been judged from the people that don't like it and think it's fake and stuff like that. So I'm gonna talk about that in this video. But first of all, and I'm gonna get back to that matter, but first of all let me explain how I became a pro wrestling fan as an adult, because the majority of times when something like this happens, when an adult is a huge wrestling fan, they have actually been a fan all the way since they were just a little kid, and they just never stopped loving it. So they just kept loving it and they grew up, and as an adult they still love it. But my story is a little bit different, because I used to love wrestling as a kid. I was introduced to it by playing video games actually. I used to play the SmackDown vs. Raw 2011, and trust me, I've played a lot of wrestling games through my years, but that one is still, in my opinion, the absolute best wrestling game out there, and bar none, nothing is better. But that's how I was initially introduced to wrestling, by playing that game. And afterwards, because I couldn't watch the shows as a kid in our own household, because my parents were very much against it. They thought it was too violent for a kid to watch this kind of stuff, especially a kid my age. I wasn't that young, but still they thought that it's not appropriate. But on the other hand, my grandpa was super cool, and during the summers I always used to stay at their place, because my parents used to be employed, both of them, and so nobody was home, and they would take me to my grandpa's place, and I would stay there the majority of the summer. And therefore my grandpa knew that I liked watching wrestling, and he himself liked it a lot as well. So we would just sit down and watch the shows together, and it was some of the best times of my life, truly. And that's how I was initially introduced to the shows and the wrestling matches, the real thing. And so I became a huge fan of many superstars. I liked everybody, but most of all, to me, John Cena. I mean, of course, John Cena was the best. Randy Orton also, both of them. I loved both of them equally as a kid. Those two were my top guys. And of course, The Undertaker just goes without saying, everybody loves him. And so that's how I was introduced to the pro wrestling scene and WWE, and I loved it. As a kid, I absolutely loved it. But there was kind of a reason to it. The reason that I loved it so much back then was because, first of all, it looked super cool, I mean, of course, but the real reason behind it was I absolutely thought, and I was absolutely positive, that this is all real. Everything that I'm seeing here is all real. And well, of course, it's not. It's scripted. I wouldn't say it's not real, because most of the bumps they take are absolutely real, but it is scripted and predetermined, of course. And I didn't know that at the time. So a few years passed. I became a teenager. I think it was around, I would say 2014, 2015. I became a teenager, and I stopped kind of loving it that much, because it started dawning on me that, oh man, yeah, this doesn't make sense. It's not real. It's scripted. It's predetermined. So that sort of happened over a course of like a few years, and I stopped loving it. Just quite simply, I said, okay, this is scripted. There's no point in watching it, because everything is scripted and it's fake. Okay, so I'm not watching it. It's not the real thing. So yeah, after that, a good few years passed by. Now I was a senior in high school, and I was graduating very soon. And this was also the pandemic era and the lockdown era. So I spent the majority of my time at home and I didn't really have much to do. During this time, I started really falling in love with MMA and specifically the UFC. And I started watching a lot of their press conferences, a lot of the fights, a lot of the events. And I came to realize very soon that CM Punk had actually fought in the UFC at some point. And that was a huge surprise to me because I would never have thought of CM Punk as the kind of guy who could be a real fighter, especially during this time, because during this time I had such respect for MMA fighters because of how hard the sport really was. And at the same time, as my respect grew for MMA fighters, my respect was just dramatically decreasing for WWE superstars, because I was like, man, these guys are putting so much effort into this and training so hard and bringing real violence to the table. And on the other hand, you got the WWE guys that literally do nothing and they just follow some script and they kind of go around and talk about how tough they are and stuff. And I had lost such immense respect for them during this time. So when I came to the realization that damn, CM Punk was actually in the UFC at some point, I was very shocked because, as I said, I could have never imagined him as a real fighter and somebody who could fight at such high caliber. And to be honest, he wasn't that kind of guy. I mean, we saw it in his fights. He wasn't on that level, but I gained immense respect for him for even stepping into the cage, because there are so many WWE superstars who would not do that, and they are bigger than CM Punk, they're stronger than him, but they wouldn't do this. So I gained such enormous respect for him because even as a kid, I was a huge fan of CM Punk, and he was very special to me. Now, before that, I knew that Brock Lesnar was also a UFC fighter at some point, and he even was a champion and he defended the belt. He was one of the best heavyweights of all time at the time. So I knew that, but I wasn't really that much of a Brock kind of guy, because during the time that I used to watch wrestling as a kid, Brock wasn't really active and I didn't really know much about Brock. So, but when it came to CM Punk, I used to be a huge fan of him as a kid and I had so much respect for him. And one of the reasons that I actually stopped watching WWE and pro wrestling as a whole was because he left the WWE, and that was a huge shocker for me, and that kind of took a lot of the soul out of it for me. I really liked seeing CM Punk in the WWE, and when he left, it's sort of I guess I could say I lost a lot of love for it. But anyway, so I found out that CM Punk was in the UFC for some time, and I watched his fights. And it just made me respect him even more, because he clearly was outmatched in both of his matches. I think he only had 2 matches in the UFC. He was clearly outmatched in both of them, but he still kept fighting. And how could you not respect that? I mean, the creative and the director decisions could be questioned, of course, because Dana White, I think, put him on the main card, and it was absolutely stupid because, like, he's not a high caliber fighter. He's not somebody who deserves to be in the main card of a UFC event. I mean, this is not a pro wrestling event. He didn't deserve to be on such high place in the cards and in such important cards. I think he was on the pay-per-views. So I absolutely disagreed with that, but going back to the topic, I gained enormous respect for him. And that kind of got me thinking about WWE again, so because I was like, man, these pro wrestlers they can take some punishment, and they can they can be warriors at times. So, but I didn't really think much of it until I was nearing the end of my last year in high school, and there was so much pressure on my mind. The times got tough because I had to take an SAT at the end of the year and the exams were coming up. There was just so much mental pressure on me. And at this time, I started reminiscing so much about my childhood days because, you know, we all do it sometimes. I felt like back then life was much simpler, life was much more happier, and trust me, at the time I didn't know what was awaiting me in the following years. Those days were pretty good days, now I understand. But at that time I thought they were the worst days ever at high school. But anyway, so as I was reminiscing, I started reminiscing so much about WWE. Because I used to watch it a lot. I enjoyed watching it because, well, at the time I thought it was real and I enjoyed watching it a lot. And of course, my top guys, as I mentioned earlier, were Randy Orton, John Cena, and stuff. So I just kind of missed it, and I started looking it up on YouTube. I started searching for John Cena entrances, and mostly they were the old entrances from back in the day. But eventually I searched up for his latest entrance, and during that time, it was his latest entrance and his latest appearance was against Roman Reigns. He faced him for the Universal title at SummerSlam 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So I watched it. I was very hyped up. Because it really took me back to the old days, and I absolutely loved it. And as a kid, I also really, really loved Roman Reigns and the Shield and Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose, who is not in the WWE anymore. He's Jon Moxley in AEW. But anyway, I love those guys as well. So to see how far Roman had come during these years and how amazing he had been, I mean, I could feel the aura when I saw his promos with John Cena, when I saw the match, the SummerSlam match, and Cena was still Cena. I mean, of course, he was my childhood hero, and I have always been a huge fan of Cena. And that kind of got me hooked again. Now, how did it get me hooked? It wasn't actually about Cena. It was nothing about Cena. I mean, I was very hyped up and very happy to see all of that again, to see Cena is back in the WWE again. But what actually got me hooked was the Bloodline story. The Bloodline story was so well done. It was so amazing, and to experience it, it was so good. And I slowly but surely started catching up, and I started watching the older matches and really kind of getting the knowledge that I needed. And all of a sudden, I found myself completely hooked to this storyline, and week after week I was watching the SmackDown shows, the Raw shows, just to see where it goes, because I was very hooked. And it was very interesting and entertaining to me, because I felt like it was also very well written. I spent a lot of time understanding and finding out all of the lore, as I mentioned, and all of the relations between the characters, the Usos, Roman, and the Elders, The Rock, the others. And yeah, that storyline really got me hooked. So all of a sudden, I was back watching the pro wrestling scene, and I was back at watching WWE, and all of a sudden I felt like, man, this is very goofy, though. I shouldn't be doing this as a grown man. But then I started sort of dropping my guard and being a little less sensitive about it, and really looking at it logically. And what I saw logically was this: I am basically watching a theater performance, which is being broadcasted also for millions of people, which is, despite being a theater performance and a scripted performance, it's extremely physical and extremely tough and extremely difficult to do, and at the same time very, very dangerous for the athletes who are performing in it. And yet they're putting their lives on the line, they're taking so much out of their bodies and hurting themselves so much just in order to impress and entertain their audience. And in that I found huge respect for these superstars and these performers, all of them, because I came to realize that it's not only about taking huge bumps, taking so much damage, putting your life on the line, but other than that, it is also about having good acting, having good promos, which required very good speech, and being able to talk well, being able to walk well, being able to look well, look good, and being in shape and everything. All of these things took a lot of time. They took a lot of practice and a lot of sacrifice. Then later on, I came to realize that these people, these performers, these superstars are on the road for over 200 days of the year, and they're sacrificing the time they could be with their families and they could be with their friends in order for us to be entertained. And at that time and at that point, I felt like a real fool to have thought that, yeah, these guys are just a bunch of clowns that are just acting like fools around the camera and stuff like that. I really felt like a fool. And yeah, after that, I've been hooked ever since. I mean, the Bloodline storyline was absolutely amazing. I'm not gonna get into that too deep because I wanna have different videos on those. But yeah, ever since then, like, it's been 3 or 4 years that I'm watching the wrestling scene, and I'm a huge fan of it. And I believe in today's world, people are very ignorant about it. That's the reason why, because I used to be ignorant. I've been in their shoes. I know what they feel and I know what they think. They think that, okay, this is scripted, and a scripted violence is no violence at all. A scripted battle and combat is no combat at all. But I absolutely disagree with that right now, because when you watch a movie, when you watch an action movie, the combats in that movie are also scripted. The fights in that movie are also scripted, and it's the same thing for everything. When you go to a theater show, it's the same thing. But the difference between the pro wrestling scene and the movies and normal theater performances and stuff like that is that these are not just actors. These are not just athletes. These are professional stuntmen going out there in one take, putting their lives on the line, and at the same time acting while they're performing such physically demanding things. And at the same time, they're putting their lives on the line, and it's all for the sake of entertaining their audience. How could you not respect that? How could you not admire the amount of effort and sacrifice that these superstars put into their work in order to entertain their audience and the people who watch them? While at the same time, I'm still a huge MMA fan. I'm still following it very closely, but you see it so many times that in the MMA scene, you see it so many times that a lot of fighters just value their own chances and winning at the end of the day. I mean, that's completely natural and that's completely normal, though you can't blame them for doing this. But many times the athletes in the MMA scene and stuff, they value their own benefits over what the consumer gets. You get a lot of boring fights, but at the end of the day, the boring fighter wins, like Belal Muhammad. And I'm not gonna say that he's a bad fighter. He's not. Some people say he's a bad fighter or stuff. I don't believe that. He's a very good fighter. He's very elite, but at the same time, he's very fucking boring. He's super fucking boring. But that's what I'm trying to say. And you can't, as I said, you can't blame the MMA fighters. MMA is not WWE. Those people are also dealing with different risks, and what they do is absolutely respectable. But in the WWE scene and in the pro wrestling scene, AEW and other companies, you have to respect, in my opinion, you have to respect the sacrifices and the things these people do in order to entertain their audience. And I believe if people set their ignorance aside, and if people dare to have an original opinion for themselves in this day and age, that's pretty rare. I have to tell you, in this day and age, being able to have an opinion for yourself that is different with what the other people believe is very hard, and to be able to speak out loudly about it and not be afraid of getting backlash and being judged for it, it's even harder. But if people do that, and if they set their ignorance aside and dare to have a real opinion and dare to give something a second chance in their lives, I believe many more people as adults would enjoy pro wrestling and would be huge fans of it. So yeah, that's about it. That's how I am a huge wrestling fan as an adult. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.